Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from LastCar.info, and welcome to Behind the Wall, the post-race show that comes on after the race. And with this, we have the conclusion of the second race of the season at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. And in a dramatic three-wide finish after a complete mess of a race, Daniel Suarez has unofficially picked up the second win of his Cup Series career, his first since Sonoma in 2022. Tremendous effort for him, especially given the fact that he wasn't really one of the top contenders for most of the day, with how often the lead change was changing up there. This is a race that honestly, even while warming up for the show here, I'm not exactly sure how to feel. I think it's going to definitely stir up the debate between what the difference is between a great finish and a great race. I think there's probably going to be some split in the authority on all that too. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the Levigated Charlotte back in 2005, where you had a photo finish between Jimmy Johnson and Bobby Labonte, but you just had a complete mess where the track surface was creating all kinds of problems there. But in this one here, again, the Atlanta track, since it was reconfigured a couple of years ago, has lent itself to this super speedway racing. We've had definitely some unusual races with this mix of mile-and-a-half racing and super speedway racing at the same time. But I would say that I think you could probably still claim that this is probably the best of those races. Certainly by the finish, it absolutely was, undeniably there. But three-wide finish, I mean, even much more so than the 2005 Charlotte deal. You have to kind of go back pretty far back to think of a finish that close, especially in a points-paying race here. A lot of the most famous photo finishes just between two different drivers, and certainly not this close of a margin here. 0.003 of a second, the unofficial margin of victory between Suarez and Blaney, with Kyle Busch stuck in the middle there, 0.07 of a second behind Suarez and 0.004 behind Blaney. Seemed like at first he was going to go to the 0.10 of a second there, and perhaps even best the Darlington 2003 finish for the closest Cup finish ever in a points-paying race. But again, it's really hard to say how to feel about this one, because it was so sloppy and so crazy. It was so much absurdity right from the beginning, with Josh Williams going behind the wall for what seemed like it was just going to be a mechanical issue, and then he ended up under the DVP and eliminated from the race before he even really had a chance to do anything out there. So a lot of craziness just at both ends of the field, though. But I think the most important thing to look at, first and foremost, is congratulations to Suarez. And yeah, that was a absolutely fantastic finish out there. I think whatever, race preceded that there for sure, the booth was definitely gobsmacked with how that played out there. And undoubtedly, that's going to be making the rounds on social media and YouTube here for the next week, which is great for the sport. Anything that's good for the sport, I'm totally behind. I think it's going to be, something that hopefully helps out things at the Atlanta track. I think regardless of its configuration, they've historically had problems selling out this race. Even during this race, we saw a big portion of the backstretch parking lot opened up there too. And then of course we had the rain shortened race last year, which was itself getting pretty good too. I think probably before the rain delay we had, I think that was probably about the best race that we've had at this track up until this point. Obviously it had some interesting storylines throughout the field there, with JJ Haley getting in the top 10. BJ McLeod also had a pretty good run in that race as well. And it seemed like right when the race was starting to get good, where Suarez was battling for the lead, but couldn't make his way around William Byron at the time. I thought that was getting to be pretty good. Who knows if it would have had a finish quite this crazy here, but luckily in this case we did see it, and good to see a finish under green as well. Just shows what's so important about the last lap of a race, and hopefully not having it spoiled by one person spinning this way or that way. Given the number of cautions and caution flag laps we had, I guess it was more surprising than anything that it was even allowed to play out there. But a tremendous effort for Trackhouse and for Suarez. I know that after Sears Point, when he won the race out there, he was already anxious to, felt freed a bit there for sure, that he would be able to pull off some more victories. Unfortunately, he had a real difficult season last year. Not as bad as some of the other top contenders in the sport, but it's good to see him bounce back. Undoubtedly, it's going to be a very popular win, on top of his win in the Mexico Series race at the LA Coliseum just earlier this month. So I think it's been a great start to the year for him. And really, I think Trackhouse is off to a solid start with Chastain being so much of a factor in the 500 finish last week. So it's really hard to say. I think that in the immediate aftermath of such a crazy finish like this, I think any negative viewpoints of this race or the quality of racing or what they did to this track is going to be viewed at with a pretty narrow lens. But I think the track is still worthy of some criticism along the way when you have other drivers that were checked and released from the infield care center, including Josh Williams, who were very upset at the track itself. And we've heard this consistently from races in the past. I know there have been a lot of people saying that, okay, well, this track it's surface, it's got to age in and create its own kind of racing. And, hopefully it'll be more competitive or just, it's never going to go back to the way it was in the 1997 configuration, or certainly not the even older one before that. But I think the super speedway style of racing, that's the part where I'm a little bit hinky on this, is because I think there was some good discussion earlier in this weekend about the possibility of what if they ran this race unrestricted? What if they just kind of loosen that up there and they don't have to have pack racing all the time? I think, unfortunately, I think the one drawback to this finish here is that's going to step that back pretty far. I don't see them changing that format after a finish like this, because now this is going to be the expected standard every time, and that's going to be kind of tricky. I'm glad that this isn't the type of racetrack that they run at all year long, much like Kyle Larson said in his post-race or his post-accident interview after the tangle there with Keselowski and LaJoie. But again, I think that, to build on the race from last summer, and as solid as I thought that race was, Lastbro wasn't that impressed with last summer's race, but I thought that was getting pretty good. Unfortunately, before it was rain shortened there. But, again, there's definitely some positives to look at here from this track. I'm still not 100% sold on it. I think we saw some of the drawbacks of this track in the Truck Series and particularly the Xfinity Series race yesterday. But we have seen time and again that this next-gen car seems to really handle well at these mile-and-a-half tracks, and I guess that even translates to ones that are converted to super speedways or run super speedway-style racing. I think another thing that this finish immediately reminded me of was the 600 a couple years ago, which I think was the first breakout race of the next-gen era, where everybody was really excited for how the racing was, and that one had a three-wide battle in the closing laps before you had a wreck, and Denny Hamlin found his way through the melee there. But it was good to see, something kind of shake out there too. I see the comment there on Harris Devane. Yeah, kind of bringing back memories of the old ARCA finish there that the Hoover Motorsports team was involved in years ago there too. Yeah, kind of an interesting situation there. Is it even in the top three of Atlanta finishes, 8206? Very good question. It's so hard to compare because the form of racing has changed so much. And you raise a very good point in that too, that Atlanta has had a long history of having just absolutely fantastic finishes with the old configuration and with, again, old meaning 1997 to now. To me, that doesn't feel that old, but that's the case. But you think about, all the references we had to the 2001 finish, of course, during today's broadcast. You think the 2005 between Carl Edwards and Jimmy Johnson, and others of that nature there too. I think it ranks up there. I think if you have a three-wide finish, I'm struggling to think of other examples of a three-wide finish for the lead. The closest I could think of is the 1981 Talladega race, where you had Ron Bouchard take advantage of the battle between Darrell Waltrip and Terry Labonte coming to the finish, and he kind of snookered them there. But even then, I think those three cars had more distance between them than the three cars did in this case here too. Probably another one you have to look at too would have to be, my goodness, other battles. I just drew a blank there for a moment. But thinking of other races where, things get that close. I guess I was thinking about Austin Cindric's battle in the race itself today. The four-wide pass that he pulled off into turn one. I think despite the fact that Cindric didn't pull off the win, still got a top five, fourth place run. I would still call that the move of the race, even despite the finish playing out the way it did. That took some absolute guts to pull off. I know that everybody's talking about the Hail Melon and how brave it was to do that. But I think dive bombing into turn one there and really trying to make something happen and working his way around it, it was shocking to see. and Kyle Busch trying to follow him through and then stalling out there, and you had kind of something else happen further back in the pack. Again, I think this more than anything kind of reminds me of when we were talking about the duels last week going into the 500 and how, do crashes make a good race? I don't really think so. I think good racing makes a good race. And I think in the duels we saw, we saw wrecks for sure, very big wrecks, even in both those events themselves. But we also saw some really tight battles. Actually, Austin Cindric was involved in one of those as well with his close battle to the apron of Harrison Burton at the final at the end of that one too. So I think when we actually had some racing, when drivers were actually able to kind of, compete with each other there on that was really good to see. The other concern I had about the Atlanta race coming into this one, and I think I mentioned this on social media as well, was how how unforgiving this track can be whenever you have any kind of damage. And when you started this race off with a big pileup on lap 2 of the race, where you have a big portion of the field, you basically 16 cars, the record for the largest pileup in terms of car count in Atlanta. You have about more than a third of the field here involved in wrecks, and most of them have fender damage. You just figure, okay, we can write them off, because whenever this race started, even in these last couple of years, if you have the slightest bit of damage, you're going to be just stranded in the back of the field and not being able to get back up there. Bubba Wallace had an incident here in one of the first races, slid into the inside wall, had some damage to his fender, and was just, he would break off from the back of the pack, lose a lap, and then fall out of contention. I would say that was probably one of the biggest differences that we saw in this Cup race versus certainly the Xfinity race, and to an extent the Truck Series race yesterday, is you didn't have as much of the field breaking away there at the same time and losing laps at the same moment. You did have some drivers that would lose time with pit stops and so forth, and then you had others that just were going behind the wall to actually repair damage. But I think in this case here, it was refreshing to see that drivers could get back into contention here, even if they had some damage. We saw Chase Elliott re-enter this pack constantly. We saw Denny Hamlin run over other cars there at the outside line in pileups and still get back up there again. That was good to see. I'm glad people weren't completely eliminated from contention, because when that wreck happened at the beginning, I was like, oh man, this is going to be like the 2021 500, where maybe you have a third of the field out there just kind of running single file and not doing much out there. That obviously was not the case. So I think that contributed to this race being as competitive as it turned out to be. I don't know exactly what the reason was for that. You could certainly look at the number of cautions, because that's going to reduce the chances of drivers losing laps at the same time, or even breaking away from the back of the pack there and end up getting gobbled up. We saw that in the Xfinity race very quickly, I think during Jesse Love's dominance of the Xfinity race yesterday. So that was a positive indication. Thank you. I'm seeing a couple people mention this as well. Yes, the 2011 Spring Talladega race is absolutely another example you can mention there, back during the glory days of the tandem era, with the dramatic finish that Jimmy Johnson pulled off. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely a thrilling finish in that one too. I'm still a big fan of the tandem era. I don't get the outrage that a lot of people have about it. It seemed like a good portion of both younger and older fans weren't crazy about that. I wonder how much overlap there is between people who didn't like tandem racing and not liking the racing at this Atlanta track today. I tend to think of myself as one that I'm not as sold on this Atlanta track. I think coming into this race, I was certainly thinking that maybe the discussion was going to be, okay, are we going to really look into, at least making the cars unrestricted and trying a different kind of racing here? Is there even a possibility of reconfiguring the track into something closer to the way the track once was? I don't think the track's willing to do that. But again, I do think that this finish here, though, I think that's pretty much ended that. And as somebody who's been very much a detractor of the Atlanta track here, I'll concede that as well. I think it's going to be, unless there's just a whole series of really boring races or wrecks that just get really out of control, I don't see that happening. I think that's the other thing that maybe contributed to maybe helping this race a little bit is that a lot of the big wrecks that we saw especially on the back straightaway, I think we talked about this a little bit during the Daytona show. usually you'd have a big pile up on the back straightaway, which would collect a lot of lead lap cars. BJ McLeod, for example, would often be on the lead lap and still being able to keep up in the pack. He wouldn't hardly get any mention in the broadcast at all, but then he'd be involved in the accident. And I remember it was always tricky to kind of get some notes because this happened like twice, that he would get in a wreck back there, and I wouldn't know how he was involved in the accident, but he would be out of the race regardless, and he would drop out of it. And that usually happened about 2/3 of the way into the race itself. In this case here, if you have it on lap 2, I don't know if that either. It almost seemed like it had the opposite effect. It, instead of having a cooling effect on the race and making it less competitive and everybody running single file, there were times that they were running single file for portions of it. But it almost had the opposite effect, and they ran even more aggressively throughout this. We saw a lot of drivers bounce off the wall and keep going. We saw a lot of very, very near misses out there too. And as Dale Jr. very correctly pointed out, there's probably way more that we did not see because the broadcast is still zooming the camera in too tightly. I'm glad Junior weighed in on this. I still hold out some hope that maybe that's going to change things in the near future, or at least get the ball rolling into having that change a little bit. Because, I think that my perception and others that maybe aren't entirely sold on this track would change if they were able to actually see more of the action or it was presented a lot better. You probably had people feeling the same way about super speedway racing in the late 80s when they brought restrictor plates in there. And then you had drivers back then that weren't sold on that either, and that completely changed the complexion of it. And you wanted people to, race full speed out there. It could be argued how feasible that would be, especially after the Bobby Allison accident that led into that in 1987. But that's another thing to certainly look at too. But I think it almost, the way that the race finished almost made it feel closer to what we saw at Charlotte a couple of years ago. And hopefully this is a sign of, maybe this race, calming down a bit. Maybe it is still worth trying to run it unrestricted, at least to kind of break the packs up a little bit. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about if it having different kinds of pack racing from what we're seeing at Daytona and Talladega, because that one lane gets eliminated, and we're kind of using the video game model on this. It's I hate to say I still have mixed feelings about it, but I honestly do, because again, and I'm not going to, nothing to take away from the finish and how crazy that was. Absolutely, that was fantastic. I'm just not exactly sure what I did see here. I think at some point during this race, as kooky and crazy as it was getting, I almost had to just kind of unplug a little bit and just be like, you know what? I'm going to view this like the All-Star race used to be back in the 2000s. Like, a bunch of crazy stuff's going to happen. People are going to get in wrecks that don't usually get in wrecks. You're probably going to have some scuffles from people. It'd probably be more enjoyable to just, not worry about the fact that this is a points-paying race in this case, and just be like, okay, we'll just embrace the madness of it. And I think it was a bit more enjoyable at that point, because then at that, it was about halfway through the race. And thankfully being 400-mile race too, I think that's a good distance for it as well. I think it's another thing to certainly look at. But, again, I'm still not a fan of this track. I'm not willing to. That's where I kind of draw the line a little bit in Clint Boyer in particular being so enthusiastic about this. Like, oh, this is my favorite track. This is the best racing ever. This is that. It's like, well, hey, cool your jets. It's the second race of the season. It's still very early in the reconfiguration of this track. Hopefully we get some good racing at other tracks that maybe you don't traditionally have really tight battles up there. Maybe this is an indicator of the car itself and the package. We're going to know that pretty quickly, I think, in these next couple of weeks, depending on, what happens in Las Vegas or at Phoenix and so forth, or even how it's going to handle at the road courses. Are those going to be, what kind of racing are we going to have there? Are we going to have situations with multiple overtimes and wrecks like we had last season? How much of a change are we going to get there? I can certainly see why NASCAR stacked these two super speedways at the beginning of the year. I think given the delays of the Daytona 500 and the fact that it got pushed to well outside its window for people to be ready to watch it, I think I'm glad that this race went well in the sense of it having a good finish and pretty crazy action in there, so that hopefully any losses they had from Daytona, from people not watching, and also really losses from the Clash, from moving that date up, with the weather that was in there too. To have a sunny weekend, which of course they have no control over, but just thankful it worked out that way. To have that and have a pretty crazy race, I'm not going to be the one that's going to dump all over that and say, oh, this is the worst. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. I don't agree with that. So, I think that, again, something that's good for the sport is something I'm not going to spit in the eye of there. So, again, I think it was an interesting race. It's maybe not my favorite kind of racing, but you're going to have people that, again, they don't like short tracks, or you got people that don't like road courses. You got people that don't like the super speedways. That's just going to be the nature of it. And luckily in NASCAR, we're gifted with this schedule that has this many different disciplines in there. You can have races that maybe you have circled on your calendar, and others that, maybe, you kind of go through and you're ready for the next one here. But I'm pleasantly surprised by, how this played out. Again, I'm happy for Suarez, and I think that was enjoyable. Not without its share of controversy, of course, this whole weekend, whether it was Joey Logano's glove, and I love the interested speculation now over even his qualifying run at Daytona that was put up on Twitter as well. Was he wearing the same gloves during that? A little bit of extra intrigue there. I'm with Alanis King on this. I'm interested in these teams trying such creative ways to get an advantage out there. We've seen a lot of these drivers stick their hand out the side window, especially during qualifying, to try to get an advantage. And Logano now caught with a baseball mitt. I think that was a great metaphor that Mike Joy had to describe it. And again, kudos to Fox for showing this as well, because I think that was the best way they could show it, other than literally showing the glove. But you see that webbing between the thumb and the forefinger there, and you can understand that would have an effect. If having your hand out the window has some effect, then having, an extra larger surface area must have some effect there too. So very interesting way that played out. Chase Elliott already starting in the middle, the back of the field in, 28th place, dropping to the back of the grid with engine sensor change. Unfortunately, the Hooters car still hasn't pulled off a victory since Alan Kulwicki's 1992 Pocono win. Chase is just running a few races with the Hooters scheme here this year, as he has in years past. Hooters, I know it's still strange to me to have Chase Elliott be in the Hooters car when his father lost to Alan Kulwicki by 10 points in 1992. But then you remember that Hooters is actually based in Atlanta. So it makes sense that they bring it out for this event here too. And I guess still have that connection with the Elliott family too. So that would be another one to look at the same time. But ends up back further in the order. Chase Elliott was probably involved in more incidents than just about anybody else in this race after the first wreck. Daniel Suarez, your winner over Ryan Blaney. Kyle Busch in the third spot here. Can't forget the third party in this. Kudos to Busch for splitting the middle there and just seeing what's going to happen. I think that was also a very daring move, right up there with Cindric's move as well there. And almost paid off by 0.07 of a second. You never knew how that was going to shake out. Cindric again. I'm going to be very interested to see how Cindric performs at Las Vegas and Phoenix here in this next couple of weeks. I'd like to see if his performance at these super speedway-like tracks can transition over to that. I'm very impressed with his start to this season. Hopefully it keeps going. And I think I'm going to be watching him very closely in these next couple of rounds, because they're going to be two very difficult tracks that I don't really think of Cindric excelling at, even when he was in the Xfinity series, turning things around in 2020. So we'll see how things shake out there. Bubba Wallace with a top 5. Great effort for him. Follows up his top 5 in Daytona. Had significant damage to the nose of his car. I know it was a short list of people that didn't, as they showed in the broadcast there. But a fine run for him. Ricky Stenhouse in 6th, last year's 500 winner. Seemed to be one of the only drivers I think still wasn't involved in an accident by the finish. Ross Chastain in 7th. Michael McDowell, the pole sitter. Congratulations to McDowell, coming back from the disappointment of missing out on the 500 pole last week to get his first pole in his first, 470th Cup start, 476 thereabout. I mean, just a tremendous length to his career, back to the times of start and parking for HP Racing or Phil Parsons Racing way back in the day. But a fine effort for McDowell after a wreck on entering pit road, where he crossed the nose of William Byron and stuffed them both into the fence. I think that was a tremendous recovery. Chris Buescher looked like he was out to lunch as well, crunched in the back of the Denny Hamlin wreck. It came back to finish 9th. Ty Gibbs came back from a spin to get 10th. Harrison Burton came back from getting in the lap 5 wreck at Daytona to finish 11th. Didn't see much of him out there in the race there. One that definitely deserves the Goodies Headache Award would have to be Todd Gilliland. I think other than his Talladega race a couple of years ago and his dramatic save in the duels last year, definitely the best run that we've seen out of Todd in general in this one here for how long he led. As was mentioned in the broadcast, Front Row Motorsports leading the most laps that they ever had in one race. And of course, after Logano's penalty, the first time that the team actually swept the front row. So I'm sure that was a moment. Hopefully the team PR got a good shot of that in the moment before the race started there for the effort there after the 4th place qualifying. Gilliland was moved up to the front row at the start of this race here, assuming it shook out that way, depending on which lane he took or whatever. But tremendous turnaround there for him. Heartbreaker, though, that he lost 3 laps there with the green flag pit stop, ends up 4 laps down and finishing in 26th place there. Seeing other drivers here, BJ McLeod came out of this one in one piece, 3 laps down in 24th place. Again, cherry picking which races he's going to run this year. As he said at Daytona, he's not interested in participation awards or anything and just running the whole season. But hopefully he gets a good performance the next time we see him. I don't know if we're going to see him between now and Talladega. I know he has indicated the possibility of maybe running the road courses this year, and whether that means they're going to put Josh Bilicki in the car or somebody else, who knows? I think that's going to be something that's still coming together there too. We saw Denny Hamlin come back from a couple incidents. He ends up 23rd, 1 lap down. Justin Haley was in the top 10 for a bit. He ends up 20th. Carson Hocevar was in about 9th or 8th place. In the last 40 laps, he ends up getting clobbered on the inside, just like he did in an Xfinity race last year. And I think it was at Charlotte. I guess it wasn't Atlanta, but it seemed very similar circumstances. Unfortunately, drops Hocevar back to 19th, but he still finished on the lead lap. I thought the damage that he had in that wreck was going to be enough to take him out. That was not the case. Talking about Chase Elliott in the Hooters car, came back to finish 15th. Kaz Gralla got spun up by Kyle Busch, came back to finish 14th. Corey LaJoie got in the incident with Keselowski, finished 13th. There's pretty much a long paragraph long story behind everybody on this list here that had one thing or another happen. This goes back to the initial wreck itself. Alex Bowman ended up finishing 27th, 5 laps down. He pretty much lost all of those laps sitting on the hook of a tow truck at the entrance to pit road. I guess he lost at least one of those being stranded on the apron. Big thanks to No Tires Just Gas, who usually visits here in the chat. She was out at the track there and sent a picture of the 48 stranded on the apron in turn 1 before he was picked up by the tow truck. And then the tow truck didn't want to get in the way of the rest of the field actually coming in to get repairs. So they were sitting at the entrance of pit road and dropping Bowman down the standings. You had, after Logano lucked out and had to do the pass-through penalty because of the glove situation, he ended up in the Sterling Marlin 2001 Daytona 500 situation where a flat tire in that race caused him to be a half lap behind when the big wreck happened. And just like in that case, Logano escaped that one scot-free. Unfortunately, Logano ends up in another accident much later and finishes in 28th. But Tyler Reddick was briefly in last place with some damage that he had when he went back out there and Bowman's car got dropped off in its pit stall. Then Bowman took over last place. And about the time that happened was when Josh Williams went behind the wall. I was very surprised that Williams went to the garage. I thought he had an unrelated mechanical issue. Maybe he picked up debris in the radiator. I still don't know the exact parameters of what was involved. I know, thank you to Jonathan Field and the others there. They had some great interviews with Williams after the race to show that Williams was involved in the accident. Didn't seem like too severe damage because they lifted the hood and so forth there. But unfortunately, the moment that he went behind the wall, NASCAR incorrectly said that he wasn't on the damaged vehicle policy clock, then said that he was, and that ended the race there. So the first time since 2011, when Dave Blaney had kidney stones and swapped rides with Mike Skinner to drive the second Germain Racing entry, which was the Big Red sponsored number 60 Chevrolet. It was originally a Toyota earlier in the season, but ran a Chevrolet later in the season there. Pulled into the track pulled in the garage after 2 laps with that situation, listed as a vibration in the official results. I posted the link to that article on the Twitter feed there, and I'll link to it there in the tonight's feature as well. But a kind of a crazy situation. I was interested in all the people discussing Big Red as a beverage itself. I've tried it myself. I'm not that crazy about it either. I think somebody described it as just red number 7 root beer or corn syrup in a can there or something. Yeah, it's something you could probably make pretty good shaved ice stuff out of it, I guess. But I drinking it straight is a little bit too extreme. I'm so glad I don't live in that region, because I'm sure my diet would be way worse than it already is, and so I don't really want to do that. But yeah, that was definitely a crazy story back then, and ended up having a role in it today with Ryan Blaney almost pulling off the victory in this race. But your bottom 5 finishers here: Josh Williams with his first last place finish, and I believe his 8th or 9th Cup Series start very early in his career. Poor Williams just can't buy a break at the beginning of the season. Not exactly sure what's going on between being the closest to not qualify for the Clash, because he was like one fraction of one corner off Chase Briscoe for the last spot in the field, and ended up missing the cut. He comes to Daytona. He runs the Xfinity race. He gets in a wreck there, finishes back in the pack with the damaged vehicle policy. He comes out to the Xfinity race yesterday. We'll talk more about Xfinity and trucks here in a little bit. And loses 10 laps at the very beginning with the tire getting cut down and dropping him back in the order there. And then he comes back in the Cup Series race, and he's eliminated after 2 laps. So some drivers just have bad luck at one point or another, and that just ended up being his situation there this weekend. Noah Gragson, Zane Smith, Christopher Bell, and Brad Keselowski round out the bottom 5. Bell was in the garage for about 30 laps, came back out there, and it looks like ultimately dropped out of the race there after 148 laps. Keselowski involved in the accident with Larson and Corey LaJoie. LaJoie finishing well better than the other 2 competitors there with Larson and Keselowski ending up in the garage area soon after the accident and dropping out further back. Tyler Reddick climbing up from last place to 30th. He ends up 17 laps down. The number of drivers, just 2 races into the season, you already see some trends that are going to be difficult for some of these competitors out there. Zane Smith luckily had that 13th place run at Daytona to offset the 35th in this race here. It's Brad Keselowski, though, kind of struggling a bit here, not only being involved in the accident at Daytona when he was charging back into contention, but now in this case here being involved in another accident where he just lost control when he was really towards the front of the field again. But kind of the situation there. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Daniel Hemrick in the 18th spot there. Don't really have much notes on him. I think, probably if you have your car pretty clean, even if it wasn't the best car out there, it's about the kind of run I guess you can expect there too. But yeah, that's about all I have to say on the Cup Series portion of it there too. Definitely let me know in the chat something else to kind of bring up here during the race, or anything else to that hasn't been discussed, but we'll definitely cover in that as well. Thought Allison was in 88. Did I? Let's see. Yeah, talking about the Atlanta being unrestricted. I mean, yeah, I think it's certainly a possibility. Whoop, we got the screen blanking out on me here. Hopefully, don't get too distracted with the sound of this thing connecting and disconnecting here. It does tend to do that sometimes. 3rd closest finish here ever. Yeah, I mean, again, it's really puts it in perspective. Yeah, no, Carter, I agree with you too. Yeah, kudos to Bowman for climbing up some spots there. I think that was one thing. Oh, yeah, thoughts on the broadcast. Good question, Nathaniel. For the Cup Series portion, again, I think this was, we'll get to the Xfinity and trucks for sure, because I definitely have thoughts on those. But for the Cup Series broadcast, it was fine. It was fine. It was the middle ground again, I think similar to Daytona. I think Boyer was a little more noticeable in this one than he was at Daytona. I'm glad that Harvick is kind of offsetting him a little bit. Boyer has become predictable enough. Like, I could see there's that one part where, Mike Joy is trying to describe something, and then at one point he stops and looks at Clinton's. Oh yeah, where he's talking about drivers that drive around and then like try to save fuel by like coasting down hills and stuff. And he says, he's looking at Clinton. Clinton's like, look, you're looking at me like I got 3 heads. What's going on here? And yeah, and then of course Clint's going, "Oh, you old people worried about running out of fuel." It's like, well, where'd that come from? It's like, is it really just old people doing that? I mean, I don't know. Nowadays, isn't gas expensive for everyone? I don't know. It just seemed like it was just, I could see it coming. And then it's like, oh, Clint's not going to do this. Oh, he did. Okay, great. You know, he's definitely still the weakest part of the booth there, which is unfortunate. The pit road reporters, I think, were solid. I think they covered that decently. I think that when the wrecks played out, it was, I think they did a decent job following up on what was happening at the back of the pack there too, even when people were falling out. And when they made a mistake, like when Christopher Bell went to the garage area and said he was out of the race, they later clarified and said he cleared the crash clock and all that. They didn't just let that lie and let people, you know, kind of sit there. I mean, I don't mean as a lie. I mean, like leaving it out there and just letting that be the statement of record. It's like, you have this other information, definitely make sure to bring it out there. And that was good. So I don't have too many notes on the Cup broadcast outside of that. I think in Xfinity and trucks, especially trucks, it was pretty rough. And I guess we'll kind of dovetail that into the discussions of these other two races. The Xfinity Series race, don't have too much to say about it. I think this was about, whereas we saw elements of the best I think that this track can do with this current configuration in the Cup Series race there. Although still, I think the wrecks are a problematic aspect of it. I think it brings it a little too much closer to being, you know, something kind of farcical. I think if you're, I mean, I was almost thinking towards later stages, you know, this would probably be a better place to have the All-Star race, you know, kind of like I mentioned earlier, where, you know, you watch an All-Star race and you know there's going to be a lot of wrecks and crazy stuff happening. And, you know, you can just kind of unplug and not worry about it because it's not a points-paying race. You probably could run a pretty good All-Star race at this Atlanta event. Because it's always starts and stops with all these cautions. I mean, we had the cautions take up so much of a portion of it. Running it for 400 miles is just absurd. So I think that would probably be a better venue than Wilkesboro. And I'm going to keep beating the drum on that, honestly, because I still think Wilkesboro needs to be a 400 lap race. Bring that back. Hopefully don't have any stage cautions in between it and actually have it be a competitive event. I think that would be another one to look at too. So, you know, we'll see if that shakes out, but yeah, I think in the Xfinity race, we saw more of, you know, why it wasn't that good. In this one here, Jesse Love, first and foremost, again, ran an impressive race as he had at Daytona, sweeping the first two pole positions of the season. Seemed to have this victory well in hand, but some of Sheldon Creed's bad luck must still be in that number 2 car because, of course, running out of fuel at the very end there during a dramatic bit of circumstances at the end with everybody running out of fuel, or rather every Ford running out of fuel and forcing a caution at the end of the race there. You know, that definitely changed things a little bit. And brought back our good buddy Austin Hill to pull off another victory there. I would almost say in this Cup Series race today, even though he wasn't entered in it, I would have probably picked Austin Hill to win this one too, the way he seems to just appear out of nowhere and just make this happen. No matter how much damage his car may or may not have, or how far back in the pack he may or may not be. And he just manages to figure out what's going to happen there at the same time. But the story at the back of the field was much more straightforward in this case. Again, it was Josh Williams taking over last place in the first few laps there after a flat tire there. And it really also showed another drawback to the way they have Atlanta right now, not allowing them to actually have practice. I think surely in the case of Williams' Xfinity car, they could have figured out that the tires rubbing on the bodywork and they need to make these certain adjustments. It would have been much easier for them to have a flat tire or maybe just a little bit of smoke in the cockpit that they could have diagnosed on pit road with no consequence and get that figured out before qualifying, or even if they did qualifying before practice, then at least before the race. Instead, it completely ruined his day. He only gained one spot the entire race for a really simple issue that could have been figured out. But instead, you got to put the team under all this pressure where they can't fix the problem. And he's going to end up 10 laps down and just hopelessly out of contention. And I thought that was horribly unnecessary. And it's going to be another example of, you know, what we see at this track too. Hopefully that's another thing that, you know, gets reconsidered going forward, whether it is, not treating it as a super speedway, running it unrestricted, or if they keep the super speedway aspect in there, at least putting practice sessions in here. Same thing they should do at Daytona too. And for the same reason, there's just too much at stake. And we saw the cost of that in this race here too. Jordan Anderson ended up being your last place finisher here. Feature already on the lastcar.info page posted yesterday. Anderson was driving well back in the field there, lost the draft in the opening laps before Williams' situation there. Ultimately, a steering problem in the car. He had a flat left front tire that forced him to pit road in the closing laps. Had the tire change, got back out there, then said there was a problem in the front of the engine. Beyond that, I don't have any other information. I know there were some discussions about whether or not Anderson was driving a Mike Harmon car. I can't confirm that. I wasn't able to find any other information on that. So I don't know. I actually even contacted the team asking about that. So I haven't heard anything else on that. I don't think it was a Mike Harmon car. It seemed like, at least from the grill tape, they used a very similar arrangement on the nose of the car that they used on the other Anderson injuries. It could just be just as easily you do that on another car, but it didn't seem to be the case. So, but I'm not sure exactly what the situation was. Obviously, Mike Harmon's team was one of the DNQs with Stanton Barrett last week at Daytona, and they weren't entered at Atlanta this week, along with Carl Long's team. But hopefully we get some more information. If I do find out that, I'll definitely provide an update there along the way. But Jordan Anderson, Josh Williams, Kyle Sieg, CJ McLaughlin, and Garrett Smithley round out the bottom five. A lot of those drivers in this race, as I mentioned, the back of the field really fractured pretty quickly, and you had a lot of drivers that were dropping back and losing laps in the opening stages. Anderson, I believe, lost his first lap about 18 laps into the race. They would catch some other drivers on the inside. I was interested in the fact that the inside lane was the passing lane here, whereas at Daytona and Talladega, we've seen the outside lane be used by lap traffic. I think that made things a little bit hairy. We saw that in the truck race in particular, where there was so much wind blowing into turns 3 and 4. But I think in this case here, it kind of created a little bit of a messy situation there too. But Anderson, your last place finisher. First time the number 32s finished last in an Xfinity Series race at Atlanta since 2007 with Michael Waltrip. And that was the first last place run for a Toyota. Of course, in this case, Anderson driving a Chevrolet, again, most likely from his own team. I like that we had some fuel mileage there at the end. I guess it was some trade-off for all the freight train racing we saw for so much of this event. But unfortunately, we got to caution anyway. Once people started running out of fuel, when Ryan Sieg's car stalled on the apron, Austin Hill found his way back up there to pull off the victory. Some interesting runs throughout the top 10. Good to see Jeremy Clements get his, originally saying a top 5 for, or I believe it should have been a top 5, I think originally, unless I misread this, showing a 6th place run here on Racing Reference. Looking for one of his best runs since he won Daytona a couple of years ago. Jeffrey Earnhardt, Anthony Alfredo getting up there. And, of course, Shane Van Gisbergen pulling off the 3rd place finish there on the number 97. Very impressive run out of him. Of course, comes down to fuel mileage and who was able to save best. I suppose with Jesse Love leading 157 of 169 laps, he didn't have too many opportunities to do that. So perhaps the result was not that unforeseeable anyway. But Austin Hill pulling off the victory with Chandler Smith in 2nd and Shane finishing in the 3rd spot there. I expressed disappointment that the broadcast didn't really mention Anthony Alfredo. This was one of 2 spins that were missed by the broadcast on Saturday, one each in the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series. Both of them seem to happen in the same spot over in turn 1, which makes me wonder if there's some blind spot in the booth there, or maybe there's a big screen that blocks off that kind of view. But with 2 different broadcast groups, we did have that kind of situation. In this case here, it was Anthony Alfredo spinning off of in turn 1 in the opening stages, almost lost a lap, had a tire situation, and got back up there and finished in the 7th spot. I was pleased to hear from Anthony as well that he brought that up and appreciated that the story was getting out there. I can't take full credit on that one there because, again, I noticed that Alfredo had dropped to the 37th spot. I didn't see why, because originally it just seemed like, well, that's strange. I didn't think he had a reason to make an unscheduled stop. And then it was the folks over on the NASCAR on Reddit page that provided the additional details there that Alfredo was spun out, according to other radio transmissions from other teams there. So kudos to them. Really, the spin itself, it was something that was relaying more from that information. And I mentioned that on the social media there as well. But again, fine recovery for him. Jeffrey Earnhardt getting in the top 10 for Sam Hunt's team. Then looking further back, BJ McLeod in the 18th spot. Parker Kligerman again has heartbreak at Atlanta, finishing back in the 19th spot. Ryan Sieg really wasn't as much of a factor as he was in Daytona. Flirted with the top 10 a little bit at one point, but then ultimately running out of gas and dropping back in the order. We had the post-race altercation between Kyle Weatherman and crew member from J.J. Yaley's team. Seemed like completely accidental contact exiting the quad oval. Yaley himself didn't sound too upset over the radio at the time that it happened. The number 14 getting spun out and dropped to the apron there. But Yaley doing a remarkable job, not damaging his car and being able to stay back out there. Excuse me. Sorry about that. But at the same time there, Weatherman dropping back in the 17th spot at the finish and Yaley back in 24th. Bizarre altercation, especially for how much later in the race that was. The original incident seemed to be so much earlier in the event. And then suddenly you have, I guess tempers boiling over afterwards. I can't really say I'm 100% a fan of that, but different deal in there too. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, by the way. I have my screen over here that's flickering in and out here. Has actually got the chat on here. 124 people in here. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Wasn't expecting this many people in here, but of course, with a finish like that, I can't blame you. So I hope everybody's enjoying that for sure. We talked about the Cup Series race. Of course, we'll take any other questions from Xfinity and trucks, but or Cup, Xfinity, and trucks, and we'll talk about all that too. This I want to kind of pivot into talking about the broadcast for the Xfinity race. It still sounded like comedy hour over at the Xfinity series side of it. I'm not a big Adam Alexander fan. I do draw the comparison between Mike Joy and Chris Myers that, Adam Alexander is to, really Mike Joy today. I think Adam Alexander is a great host. I think he does a lot of great work at the NASCAR Race Hub. I think he shouldn't be in the booth. I think he pals around with whoever's in the booth too much, and they just laugh and don't pay attention to what's happening, and stuff slips by. And I don't think his play-by-play is very good anymore. I think he used to be pretty good on TNT, and I think he had one or two pretty good calls, including Brennan Poole when he should have won Talladega over Elliott Sadler a few years ago. But other than that, I've never been a big fan of his, and it's frustrating because he knows so much about these drivers and teams. When he does these driver and team profiles, he brings them up backwards and forwards at the drop of a hat. That's great. I just think he shouldn't be the main play-by-play guy. He would do a great job as a Chris Myers role, and maybe they go back to the Hollywood Hotel and he brings up these additional statistics about what's happening. And I think he'd do a very good job at that. I don't know why they're not really presenting that option, but I get it. I get that the booth position is the most prestigious one. I'm sure it's, the one that gets the most attention and all that, and that's fine. But they need to really consider, I think, letting people play to their strengths. And I'm not going to pretend that Adam Alexander doesn't have any, because he does. I think he's good at that. But I don't think he's very good in the booth because he pals around too much, and it distracts from the experience. I think it gets over that three-phase group where you're going into like a negative broadcast, one that takes away from the racing experience. And this was another example of it. I'm glad he's having a great time. I know that there are other broadcast groups that also did, have a good time and play around and all that. But when the race is happening, you got to kind of set that aside a little bit. You can't let stuff just kind of go by. And the greats did it, whether it's Mike Joy or Bob Jenkins or Eli Gold or anybody else in that sense there too. So, hopefully that changes up, but I'm not holding my breath there. As for the Truck Series broadcast, this hurts even more because Jamie Little is a fantastic pit reporter and does a lot of great work. I've seen her firsthand at the track there. She's great at going out there and getting the story. And I think, and again, I don't think this is an inappropriate thing to say. I do think that there are some situations where, as a reporter, if you're a male reporter, you'll get one kind of answer. And if you're a female reporter, you maybe get another kind of answer. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that, that shows why you have to have female reporters out there, because they may learn more information that, that other people aren't going to find out. They may be able to ask different questions that male reporters aren't going to ask. And I think that's important to have, which is why I think she does a great job on pit road. I think she does a, fine job talking to these crew members. I think what I'm saying in this point here is, I think if you had, say there's a crew chief that's, he's the main, crew chief for, Austin Hill coming down to the end, and he's in second place, and the crew chief's working out fuel strategy and all that. I'm sure if I walked up to that top of that pit box and shoved a microphone in his face, I'd probably get one reaction, but Jamie Little doing it, it's going to be different. So, that's what I'll say there. But I think that's a difference. I think there's value in that. And I think that's important. But she's just not very good in the play-by-play, and it's so disappointing because it seems like she has all the tools that are there. And I have to wonder how much of it is an issue of direction, or how much of it is a talent issue. I have a feeling it's not a talent issue because she has so much exposure to the sport from being a pit reporter for so long. But it's almost like, there's a different mentality there. Again, similar to Adam Alexander being a host versus a play-by-play guy. Maybe there's just too much of a gulf between being a pit road reporter and being a play-by-play person as well. And that doesn't know a gender in that case. It could be male or female in that sense. So, but, when you have moments where you're saying some people may not know that Kyle Busch owns Kyle Busch Motorsports, it's like, oh no. It's like, oh goodness. That's really unfortunate. And it's not just like it was one thing. See, that's the thing. I'm very reluctant to be hypercritical of somebody for making one mistake, but when there's a whole pattern here, when there's a trend there where, things are said or things are left out, and it just seems like it's a habit, that's when it becomes an issue. I think the most important thing is that, if something is going sideways or something just seems silly or unintentionally so, it should be brought to their attention, whoever the person is. Again, same with me. I hold myself to the same standard. So it's really unfortunate. And it's, and again, it wasn't just that moment. It was also when the roof of the number 41 came off in the Truck Series race. Bailey Currie's truck loses the roof going through turns 3 and 4. You could see it clear as day. Big 41 on the top of it. So, I could see if maybe at the moment you think, oh, was that the door panel? Was it the roof? Was it something else? It's like, it's something off which truck, it's the 41. You don't go sheet metal, perhaps? Sheet metal, perhaps? Yes. It was either the door or the roof. And if they really had been paying attention, they would have noticed that the upper part of the windshield on Bailey Currie's truck was indented, just like we saw with Zane Smith in the Homestead race last year, a penalty that he got handed. We're just talking 4 or 5 races ago, just late last season. That should have been entirely foreseeable, and they just kind of let it go by. And it wasn't all entirely on her. The other people in the booth weren't really picking up on it either, which was disappointing. But, the main play-by-play person, as long as you got the information, you gotta, catch it and show it to us there. We're reaching a point now where we almost have a parallel broadcast between what's on social media and what's on TV. And you can just get a completely different experience out there. And I guess in that one sense, it would be, it's like, okay, well, great. I guess that's job security, if you can call it that, for people that are posting stuff online, because they're always going to have plenty of material that's not getting talked about in the broadcast. But it wouldn't hurt if the other part of that was a little bit bigger, if it was a little bit larger, and it was just paying just a little bit more attention. Because there was a lot going on in that Truck Series race that just wasn't happening. It wasn't getting shown for us, and that was unfortunate. I think it could have been a lot more of a story instead of just a reaction video where the 41 pulls down pit road with the roof off, and everybody's just kind of looking like, how'd that happen? When did that happen? Well, we would have seen that if it happened, and there's no realization there. That's another kind of poor broadcasting there too. And again, that goes to all 3 of them in the booth, not just Jamie Little. They weren't helpful either, but I mean, it's really, really, really disappointing. Ryan Weil, I see your comment here. Thoughts on Phil Parsons? I think Phil's the strongest one in the Truck Series booth. I think, I think he does solid. I think he's anxious. I almost get the sense sometimes that he would like to try doing the play-by-play. I think of even like his older broadcasts versus the new ones. He seems to actually describe action that's happening or trying to pull the play-by-play person's attention to it. It feels that way. Because Phil, of course, has been at it for, a real long time, even longer than Michael Waltrip's been at it in terms of broadcasting. It's unfortunate. And he's got a great voice for it, too. I think he fills kind of that Ned Jarrett role where you got to kind of catch what else is happening. But I do sense sometimes that he's trying to pull a person's attention in there. Michael Waltrip, on the other hand, oh boy, it's frustrating. It's frustrating and it's disappointing and it's consistent, whether it's the grid walks where you're just kind of sprinting through all these drivers trying to concentrate or just saying, oh, this is the greatest racing ever. Even Jamie Little was falling into this in the truck race too. Just saying like, oh, this is the greatest racing ever. It's like, no, don't tell us that. That's for us as the viewers to determine. If it is great racing, you describe what the racing is. It's like, here he comes again. It's close racing up front. It's this, it's that. Use some other language to kind of really convey that and make us excited. Make it part of the experience. And if you're able to do it, again, that's what makes a great broadcast. You add to it, you embellish these details, you really kind of bring out why this moment is significant. And you don't treat everything like that because not every moment is significant. But when something big does happen, you recognize it and you follow it and you run it to ground and you show everybody what's happening. You make people care about it. And so when people rewatch this on YouTube or TikTok or whatever later in the week, they're going to want to relive that moment over and over again because they'll be like, oh, wow, that was great. Nobody's going to pull up a clip just because the person says, oh, this is great racing. It's insane. So I don't know. That needs to be really looked at again at the same time. But on the backdrop of all this in the Truck Series race, Kyle Busch wins again. Who could have seen that coming? I love how they're acting like the Spire Motorsports equipment is any different from Kyle Busch's equipment last year. Like, especially in these first two races of the year, they're not just running KBM equipment. I don't know who they're trying to fool with all that. The Spire Motorsports thing is always so intriguing to me because they're taking the role of what Premium Motorsports was maybe about a decade ago, just kind of glomming on to these other programs and creating something new that maybe doesn't entirely have its own identity. Although admittedly, they're creating a program that is winning races one way or the other there. So that adds an extra layer of intrigue to all this and where it may be heading. But Kyle Busch wins over Ty Majeski, Corey Heim, finishing in the next spots there. Taylor Gray, Nick Sanchez in the top five. Lane Riggs, your last place finisher here with another loose windshield, which was suffered by exactly the same team with Zane Smith at Homestead. This time around, I'm going to unplug that. That keeps doing that. Lane Riggs finishing 2 laps down in the 24th spot originally, but then actually having the issue with the windshield. Kudos to Steve Toronto over at the track for actually showing the 38 being pushed through the inspection queue after the conclusion of stage 2 of the Xfinity Series race. So well after the truck race, to the point where the 38's hauler was the only one in the infield after the actual Truck Series racing concluded. But unfortunately for the second time in 4 or 5 races, 38 team gets caught with the same infraction and they have to end up getting classified last there. Taking the last spot from Christian Eckes, who probably besides Josh Williams had a really rough weekend at Atlanta this weekend. I mean, with Christian Eckes having a brake situation while leading up front, and then NASCAR being pretty upset at the team over the radio, telling them to go to the garage area and really kind of urging them to get back there to the point where NASCAR did say that they wanted crew members from the team to go to the NASCAR hauler after the race. I didn't hear any further reports about this, but NASCAR was very not happy about what was going on with that truck being out on the field for that long with literally no brake pressure, to the point where when it was rolling down the little bit of an incline into the garage area, that you had crew members almost falling over, trying to lean their body weight back to keep from losing control of that truck, getting it back in there. Seemed like Eckes was going to come back out on the track, but unfortunately the driver climbed out, and ultimately they weren't able to make the repair. It sounded like they were going to try to fix it within the driver's cockpit. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way, and the number 19 ends up in the 32nd spot there. Jack Wood in the 31st, after what was really a strong day for the McNally team, with Daniel Dye winning his first career pole. You had, all 3 or 4 of the McNally trucks there in the top 5. Tremendous effort for them, but unfortunately, they all get shaken out throughout the group there. You had Tyler Ankrum having his best run in what feels like a couple of years. Great performance that he put together in the number 18. Unfortunately, after leading 46 laps, he gets shaken out back to the 7th spot. We saw a fantastic run out of Grant Enfinger, who was in position to give CR7 Motorsports its first ever win after getting collected in the wreck last week with team owner and teammate Cordy Rohrbaugh. Rohrbaugh wasn't entered in this week. We just had Enfinger in the field, and they put together a great run, but unfortunately a cut tire in just the latter stages there dropped him back, and then Kyle Busch ends up being the leader, and it goes from there. But Daniel Dye still gets the 9th place finish, Ankrum in 7th place. A decent effort out of the McNally teams. At least had 2 trucks up there. But I'm sure given how well they had performed in qualifying, they were certainly expecting something much better there at the same time. But looking at the back of the pack again, Lane Riggs after the disqualification, following up his wreck in Daytona last week. It's unfortunate that he still gets dropped back. Christian Eckes, Jack Wood, Bailey Curry, and Connor Jones rounding out the bottom 5. Interesting that with the missing roof for Bailey Curry, it was listed as damage in the results. I guess that's their all-encompassing thing for a problem with a problem of that nature, I suppose. We did see a roof flap issue, I think, a roof hatch issue in the Xfinity race a few years ago, and I believe that one was actually listed as the roof hatch. So I was wondering if they were going to actually list roof as the reason out, but it seems like whether or not that wasn't available or they just didn't pick it, that ended up being the case there in the results. But I still think reasons out are kind of one of the more interesting aspects of these other results here too. Floridian Motorsports got to make their first Truck Series start of the year. Mason Maggio finishing in the 24th spot. Thad Moffitt continues to struggle there with the Faction 46 effort. He ended up in a wreck over in turn 3. It looked like it was careening into the number 13 of Jake Garcia and some other traffic down there. I don't think that was deliberate, but it certainly didn't look great because it could have potentially collected a couple more trucks there on the apron. Fortunately, it was just him involved in that one, and he ends up back in the 26th spot there. More bad luck for Ty Dillon. He gets a piece of the roof that came off of Bailey Curry's truck. Luckily, Ty's okay there, but it did some pretty good damage to the top of the 25 there, finishing in the 14th spot. Brett Holmes coming back from being pinched into the outside wall to finish 11th. This is another driver. I'm just waiting for him to break through and getting his first win. I'm glad after he scaled back his program last year, it looks like he shored up his sponsorship a little bit better and getting some good runs. Raja Karuth with another top 10, finishing in the 8th spot. Caden Honeycutt finishing in 6th. A great effort for him. He's really turned things around. He's made just his first few starts these last couple of years, won a couple ARCA West races last season, and now in the Al Nice effort there, getting another good finish there, finishing in 6th. So a lot of positives to kind of draw from those events as well. Whoop, let me get this other screen back up here. Can I see it? Where did it go? Oh gosh, I'm going to have to plug this thing back in again. Hang on here, folks. All right, we're going to give this window another try. I don't know why this thing keeps disconnecting on me, but hopefully we'll let it cool down here and see if it gets connected back up here. Yeah, there we go. Yep, Auto Rock and Racing. Yeah, you're bringing up the roof hatch issue. Yeah, it was 2019, I guess that was, the Xfinity Series race where we had that problem with Brad Keselowski. So kind of an interesting way that all that played out. All righty. But let's see here. I think that's on the notes from these 3 races. Let's see, any other surprising runs up there at the front of the pack? Well, again, Daniel Dye, kudos to him. Dean Thompson getting in the top 10. Still waiting for him to break through. He led 4 laps, ended up getting kicked out of the groove there, so that was unfortunate. Lawless Allen in 12th place. Great recovery for him. He was the other driver that spun out that got missed by the broadcast. People sharing pictures of this as well. Again, it makes me do wonder about if there's something going on over in turn 1 there at the same time, but that ended up being the situation. No tires, just gas. I just saw you were in the chat here. Thanks again for the picture you sent as well. Sounds like you had a great time there with Suarez pulling off the victory there too. But yeah, an absolute photo finish there at the same time. Let's see. Yeah, Jake Garcia back in 16th. Spencer Boyd came from the back of the field to finish 22nd. Still intrigued by the fact that we had a pretty small field for the Truck Series race, coming down to just 33 trucks this week, the smallest field in trucks. I think even with 33 trucks, it was still smallest since the Phoenix finale in 2020. But again, hopefully we'll see more entrants for Vegas. Vegas tends to be a really small field for trucks. Between that one and the standalone at Texas, that seems to get some of the fewest out there. Not sure if we're going to see a return to the field fillers in that case there too, but that's certainly a possibility. While we have some good viewers, and again, thank you so much everyone for tuning in. We got 122 people in here, and thank you for tuning in. I assume if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I encourage you to do so because I have other videos that I'm working on, and I want to kind of devote some time to that while you're watching here as well. I've been very excited with the progress here this last week. We got a script recorded for the next episode of Rise of the Field Fillers, and just today, I received a whole batch of pictures that are going to be used for that particular episode. This one is not yet going to be the John Carter Racing number 37 team. This is actually going to be a third part to the Carl Long episode. There was some ground that I didn't really properly cover. I rewatched those, and I did get some good comments on this as well. This just shows, again, don't hold back on posting comments on this because I read all of them. But they had some very good points on this, that the time between 2009 and 2017, it really wasn't covered as very, very good. I kind of blurred past that. Big reason for that was my focus is much more on 2004. The stuff afterwards, I kind of wanted to just tie up those loose ends once we went through the race by race part of that season. But I think there's definitely enough material to make a third part to it. So that's what I'm working on here. And I actually received a ton of pictures here from one of his past team owners here that's going to contribute to that. So that episode is in the works. I also, in the meantime, while I was getting that together, I finished editing the scripts to 2 other videos. One is the next 500 Days episode for the spring race at Bristol in 2001. I hope to record that pretty soon. And then another one is going to be a multi-part video that is going to be about Alan Kowicki, which I'm working on. And I received, for the Kowicki one in particular, I received a ton of material from Brian Hallman over at the BRH Racing Archives. He provided some really, really good stuff that I think is really going to make that good. So I'm hoping to get all 3 of those together here in the meantime. And then actually just before the show here, there's another one for another video I'm not ready to announce yet, but I received some pictures as well from another source that I'm working on that. So there's plenty of stuff coming together. I know it's been a bit of a wait here since the last episode of 500 Days came out. I guess that was the last video update I had besides the starting grid for Daytona. But I anticipate that things are going to start getting going here pretty soon here. So I'm glad that these last couple of months have kind of really helped to get a lot of these scripts locked down, especially after we got the book release last year. And very excited to get that together. So I'd love to have 500 Days done by the Bristol race if I can. I don't know if I could turn it around that quick. It depends on how the Carl Long video goes. We're just going to see. Everything's kind of up in the air right now, too. But we're getting that together. But I'm very excited about that because that was a big goal I had for this year, is to kind of beef up the video library here on this channel. And I'm very pleased with how that's gone so far. Just been enjoying the writing process, too. Also been enjoying reading Dominic Aragon's book there on Jeff Bodine. Been reading that as well, too, which has been really enjoyable. So I hope to have some more thoughts on that coming up, too. But, yeah, hopefully you got to check something out there and you can enjoy that there at the same time. But, oh, yeah, I'm seeing this in the chat here, too. The way that you have the radio broadcast there, too. Loved having Doug Rice do the command to start engines at Atlanta. This story, it's getting a decent amount of coverage on social media, but it'd be nice if it got a little bit more coverage. Doug Rice is retiring from the Performance Racing Network at the end of this season. For those of you who don't know, PRN, separate from MRN, usually covers just the races at the SMI tracks. So like my home track here at Sonoma, hope to cross paths with him there. I'm sure he's going to be very busy that weekend. But the other races, Charlotte, Texas, Atlanta, and so forth. But also the fact that at Daytona, he was brought on there to call a couple of laps. Of course, MRN broadcast from Daytona and the other ISC tracks. But they brought him on there for calling a couple laps. I thought that was really cool. And he gave a great command to start the Atlanta race today. I thought that was awesome to see. So hopefully we'll have some other cool moments covered this season. I know he's seen a ton in his career, and certainly wish him the best through this season here too. So we'll find out how all that shakes out. As to my own trackside coverage, I'm still kind of figuring that out. I've actually been receiving some comments from some people there asking if I'm going to be at this race or that race. We're still figuring things out. One other thing that I've been working on here in the meantime is setting up some other book signings, because I've only really done one since the Derek Cope book came out in November. We did one here near Last Car headquarters over in Northern California. I'd like to do another one with Derek. We're actually in the process of working out one there. And then anybody who's picked up a book already, I'd like to be able to invite them to come out to it too. So you don't have to wait to buy a book. If you've already bought one and you want it signed, I'd like to be able to have an opportunity to do that as well. Of course, I intend to do that at Sears Point when I'm out there for that, but that's not going to be till the first week of June. But of course, when I'm out there, I want to make myself available either at Gluck's meetup or something like that weekend, and do that. I think that would probably be best. I tried doing my own thing last year. I don't know if that was really necessary. I think that we have a great group of people that follow the site and everything. But I think that as long as Jeff and Bob don't mind, I don't mind standing on the joining in there too. And then if anybody wants to hang out, we'll talk some last place action and Derek Cope and JD McDuffie and all that stuff too. But I'd love to do some more races. One thing I've been looking at actually is Kansas. We haven't done a Midwest race yet. We've done things on both coasts. We went up to Canada. We've done that. I think one other thing I'd like to tick off the list here is to do one of those. We were looking at Iowa also. I'm not sure if that's going to happen with it scheduling very close to Sears Point. But we haven't ruled out Kansas. I think that's still up in the air. We need to kind of figure that out. But big thanks to those of you in the Patreon, and especially those of you as well who are sharing the videos here on this channel, because that really helps out. Not just travel expenses for doing these races, but especially a time like now, licensing fees for music, pays our other staff writers on the lastcar.info site, pays for the site itself, which we just upgraded this year. And really this equipment, getting this arm on here, this came from Patreon too. So big thanks to everyone that's been supporting the channel. I like to put as much of it back into this as possible here to give you guys some more stuff to enjoy here at the same time. So I know it's kind of rapid fire through the 3 races this weekend. That's about all I have to say on those. We'll do some trivia here for those of you tuning in. We'll do that for those of you new to the show here. If you are new, we'll bring out the old late 90s Trivial Pursuit digital thing here and do some questions. Of course, if you have any other questions from the races this weekend or storyline I didn't cover here on the stream, definitely make sure to mention it in the chat, and I'll cover that as well. In the meantime, we'll do some trivia here. We didn't do picking a category last week, so I'll do that again here. The categories are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So those of you in the chat, you feel free to pick which category you'd like, and we'll do a few questions of that to wrap up the show here too. Kansas is awesome, shiny side up. Oh, right on. I'd love to try it. That would be a lot of fun. So that would be really cool. And going to Vegas. Yeah, I hope you enjoy that, Andrew. I like Vegas. I had another invite to go out there from a friend out there. I'd love to cover the racing out there again. I think Vegas is probably one of the most accessible tracks I've gone to. I think I've mentioned that a lot on here on the show, but that would be another part. Thank you, Ben, for mentioning the tweet up last year. I appreciate you holding serve out there. I was running late last year. That's one big change we're going to make to the coverage that I'm doing this year. Is in the past I'd driven from home to the track, but that's about a 2-hour drive both ways. So by Sunday, we were just exhausted. So this time we're going to stay at a hotel closer to the track. And but Ben did a great job there, holding fort for the group there. We had a little tweet up out there because I had a few people wanting to meet up there on that, and figured that was the easiest way to set up. So we had a good group on that one. So that was a lot of fun. We'll see if that's necessary again this year. We'll kind of play that up as well. Ryan, you're going to Indy. That'll be good. There we go. That's another one I haven't done yet. One of these days. Let's see. Patrick, I'm seeing your comment. I think you mentioned this before. I mentioned 500 days here, but yep, I do plan on continuing 500 days. I think the important thing right now, what's great about 500 days, and I know I had some questions about this and about if this was, a good idea to invest one's time. I think with that series, what's great about it is it doesn't require getting interviews for it. I can pretty much do a solid script for it just from watching the races, watching the broadcast, getting the information from J-Ski and pulling newspaper articles and synthesizing all that together. If I get interviews on it, that's cool, but it's not 100% necessary for it. Whereas a lot of the other videos I do, including field fillers, is very dependent on interviews. And as I saw from the Stanton Barrett one last year, that unfortunately kind of created a bit of a log jam on my channel. Sometimes those are very hard to set up. That's the video that I still have kind of in the background there that, I think another interview, I hope he enters a race that I'm going to be at the track. I think that's going to be the easiest option there. I'm hoping he gets a ride at Sears Point, for example, and maybe that just works itself out. But I'm not exactly sure what his schedule is, but we'll see how that shakes out. I think that's kind of what we're looking at. But yeah, the 500 Days series, it's a bit easier to produce, and it's popular enough from the other videos that I think it gets the hits. It's worth getting the attention for it. I know people were very excited when the Darlington episode came out, and I kind of underestimated how excited people were about that over the holidays. So I'm anxious to get the next one out too. Certainly with the subject matter in that Bristol race too. For those of you who already know how that race played out, you'll know that is going to be a fun one to actually break down with everything that happened that weekend. So yes, that is going to be making a comeback at the same time. Oh, petition for Alan Bestwick. Yeah, that would be great too. I do apologize for the USB thing. I have the second screen here. It's really cool. It's pretty reliable. And for whatever reason, it wasn't that much of a problem in the broadcast. But yeah, it does keep disconnecting and reconnecting during this. These are brand new wires. It shouldn't. There it goes again. It's doing it again. There it goes. So yeah. It'd be a nice way to isolate the sound so it doesn't make that noise, but I may have to. Well, actually, I'll probably check my sound settings here afterwards. Let's see. Which category has the most? Do we have anybody? It looks like we got a lot of options here. Drivers, wildcard, teams. I appreciate it. Appreciate the comments here too. Thank you. Thank you, Uncle Daddy, and thank you Gianni Pisano as well. I appreciate it. Let's see. We have wild cards. Wild card the most? Do you plan on going past 2001? Stay tuned on that. That's gonna be so far in the future. I think whenever this series is done, I think that will become clear at that point. But we'll see. But yeah, I think this 2001 season, the more I've thought about it, especially when I did the first ones on Daytona, which of course is the most challenging subject matter that year. Although, I mean, there's other ones that are very close. Obviously, the other event that occurred that year is absolutely going to have to be part of that series as well. But it's going to be whether it's going to be something continuing past that, we'll see. It depends on what things look like at the channel at that point. But I think the road will become clear at that point. But definitely through 2001 is going to be it. Yeah, computers, man, exactly. Yeah, this is a great screen. I mean, it's really clear. Here, I'll show you. Got it down here. See, it's nice size. It's a touch screen too, so you got this. I mean, it's fantastic. It's a Sidekick brand. I picked this up a while back. I mean, if it gets to be real, I mean, I don't know if it does have an issue where the wires, this wire here, it kind of has to cross over this one. So that might be why it's doing that. Might have frayed it there. I don't think it's an issue with the screen. It's just an issue with the cables. But yeah, we'll do some trivia here, which I think Wildcard has a pretty good amount of candidates. Do we have a different one? Yeah, you have a lot of movies. Yeah, the Neon Garage passes for sure. Absolutely. Wild card has 6 votes, Spencer. Okay, yeah, we'll do wild card then. So let's jump into that. You guys have waited long enough on that. Yeah, even on the back of this thing, like it needs. Yeah, I think it's the USB cable that's messed up. I may invest in a different one here because I'm not happy with it. It's at a 90-degree angle. See, look at this. Here, I'll show you a little bit more behind the scenes. See, here's the connection on the computer. So you got a 90-degree one, and it's pulling right over. Yep, there it goes again. It's disconnecting right over this, and I think this is probably these are brand new cables, but this one here is probably just a little bit, since it has to go over that, it's probably kinked. So it's the same situation on the other end. And I don't know why it's hard to find a USB to USB cable where it sticks outward. But I think that's what I'm going to have to do because this is, yeah, that's too irritating. And I certainly don't want to lose viewers here based off of that. So yeah. Lindsay Bell, I'm glad you enjoyed Field Fillers. I do have more of that in the works. Again, as I mentioned on here, I got some more pictures for the next episode of that, which I'm very excited to get going too. Let's see. First question in the wild card. What driver was American Speed Association runner-up 9 times? What driver was American Speed Association, or ASA, runner-up 9 times? Don't look it up. Try to guess it there. I will get some water here in the meantime. We had enough code red for today. We brought out our ketchup bottle here with the ketchup water bottle here. Alrighty, there we go. Let me read the question again here. What driver has American Speed Association runner-up, or what driver was American Speed Association runner-up 9 times? That is a question. My thoughts on the NASCAR Classics website, Patrick Glenn. Yeah, I love it. I think it's great. I love the crisp quality of the videos. I love I love listening to the music from these old broadcasts. You listen to some 1993 or 1994 races there, and you get to hear it about as clear as it would have been when it was live. An absolute thrill. I haven't actually browsed the site as much lately. I honestly haven't had the time, but there's a tremendous amount of content on there that's just very lovingly preserved. I know some of them, the pre-race shows are trimmed a little bit, and maybe some of the later ones, I guess there's an issue with space or something like that. I don't know exactly what. But what is in there is thrilling. We did a couple watch-alongs over the winter, watching the 2000 Talladega race or Nadeau's win in Atlanta. Really enjoyable. Very much so. So hopefully that's something that I'm very excited for whatever they have planned. Hopefully they're going to add some more series to it, add some more races to it. We're going to find out, but I think that would be good. What driver is ASA runner-up? Excuse me. 9 times is the question. And the answer is Dick Trickle. Dick Trickle is the answer, and a lot of you guessed that one. Willie B, Torn Planet. Yeah, we're disconnected again. Yeah, we're going to have to change this cable. I'm going to have to. That will be my Amazon list for this week. Let me look here. Because I hope I don't have to change the screen because I'm very happy with the screen. This thing here, when I'm looking up newspaper articles, and you can zoom in and stuff. Oh, it's fantastic. Absolutely invaluable. Behind the scenes and behind the wall. Yeah, exactly. Try running it underneath. That's actually not a bad idea. Let me try that. The clearance is really, really close. That's the other problem. The other problem is my computer because okay, unless I kink it. But you don't really want to kink it. Ooh, yeah, it's not. The clearance is too tight to go under it. Yeah, that's a good idea though. Yeah, I'm gonna look into a different one because yeah, that's infuriating. During the race, it really didn't do it that much, but yeah. Dick Trickle is the correct answer. Who's the first one to get that? Tom Anderson. Looks like you were. Yeah. See, and on the back here, I'll show you. Here's the other connection. On the back, on the other screen here, it's basically the same story. You can kind of see. Yeah, see, it's just like it's right next to the other cable. So you have a little bit more room, but it still has to kink over it. It's just so bizarre. So yeah. But it's all got to be collapsible in here. This is all built and deconstructed time after time. Whoop, that thing is right where my eye is. That looks a little weird. Okay. All right. Dick Trickle was the correct answer on that one. Let's go to the next question. What? Oh, no, that's too easy. That's too easy. Everybody knows who the Rainbow Warrior was. Here we go. Here we go. Next question. Who was dubbed Little David for beating hometown Goliaths at their tracks? Who was dubbed Little David for beating hometown Goliaths at their tracks? It's a nickname question we got this time. Yeah, Dick Trickle is certainly the answer on that one. Oh my goodness. It's almost part of the soundtrack here at this point. Oh, we got this. This thing is up a little bit too high. A little too high. Bring that a little lower. We'll get this figured out eventually. Of course, it shakes here too when I hit the table because it's sitting on the back of the computer. I tried to do it another stand with this, but then that didn't look good because it was too far back. I really don't want that because that looks really bad. But I'm sure plenty of streams have gone through these doldrums at the same time. Let me read the question again. Who was dubbed Little David for beating hometown Goliaths at their tracks? Is the question. We got guesses for Butch Gilliland and Austin Hill and Davey Allison and Dave Marcus and David Gilliland and David Pearson and Dave Mater. It may not be a person named David. It may not. It could be. It could be. We're doing a late 90s thing, and there were definitely some Davids that could be considered, but who was the original Little David for beating hometown Goliaths at their tracks? Let's take a look here. The answer is, it was David. David Pearson, the Silver Fox. David Pearson is the correct answer. Spencer Sandlin, you got that. EZ, it looks like you were the first one to pick. All right. All righty. All righty. Okay, we'll do one more here, folks. We got one more here for tonight. Last question of the evening. What is Buck Baker's real name? What is Buck Baker's real name? That is the next question on here. Don't look it up. Try to guess it here. Buck Baker's real name is the question. Oh, I want to make sure I missed this. I'm sorry. I got a super chat here earlier. Let me get that caught up here too. I definitely want to make sure you get your super chat read for sure. They are not expected, but they are always appreciated. Bowser Jr. XD, I got yours right here. Thank you so much again for the super chat. Harvick's first Cup Atlanta race saw him win in a photo finish. His first Atlanta race as a commentator, he sees the closest finish ever at the track. Well, very good point. Very good point. So yeah, a little bit of history repeating itself too. And you raise a good point too. During this broadcast, there was a really nice segment, admittedly, that Fox did where they had a bunch of fans talk about where they were when Harvick won his first race in 2001. And then Harvick showed up at the end there and was hanging out with him. That was cool. That was nice. The segment itself, I have zero problem with. So you see where I'm going with this. Segment like that didn't need any music played. It could have been without music and it would have been perfectly fine. If you have to play music for the dramatic moments that happen at the track and make sure that it fits the tone of that. I don't know what music they were playing, but it was tremendously distracting, and it didn't get less so when they played it a second time later in the broadcast there. I don't know what they picked. It sounded like my first thought was walking through a department store, like a Bed Bath & Beyond, a Crabtree at Evelyn, something of that nature. It did not evoke memories of, one of the most thrilling NASCAR finishes ever, about 3 weeks after losing one of the sport's greatest drivers. It did not evoke those emotions. I think that segment would have been much better without music, because I don't know if Fox picks the right bit of music. This is another problem with the broadcast, is they tend to just put music behind everything. And the problem is when you do that, it's got to be right, because if you pick the wrong track, it just completely distracts from it. I'm glad we didn't have to sit through all those segments before the Daytona 500 with the rain delay. I think they spared us something nice there. I think that was the perfect amount of pre-race, where it was like 3 minutes of just clicking through them really quick. I think that the perfect example of music being too much was when they had the Michael Waltrip segment with the woman that's 102 years old that's been working there as a ticket agent. Bless her heart. She did a fantastic interview. It was really cool, but the music was drowning it out, and Michael Waltrip was being Michael Waltrip, which was entirely too much going on for that segment there. It would have been nice to it would have been nice to have less going on during that. I think that would have been a different situation. So hopefully something changes up on that end. Let me read the question again here. What is Buck Baker's real name is the question. What is Buck Baker's real name? Come on. It's going to work? I don't think it's going to work on that. Okay. Alrighty. It's not letting me scroll to the bottom of the screen. That ain't good. Buck Baker's real name. Here we go. Now it doesn't want to do this. Okay, we're going to try that. How about this? There we go. Now you're going to boot oop when I want you to boot oop. Come on. Oh, all right. Okay. Live television here, folks. All righty. Is it going to do it? No, it is not going to do it. Okay, well, we're going to just jump right to it. What is Buck Baker's real name? Here comes the answer. The answer is Elzie Wiley Baker. Elzie, E-L-Z-I-E, Wiley, W-Y-L-I-E, Baker. That is the correct answer. It says Elzie. Some of you said Elise. Okay, yeah, there you go. I had to check the live chat here to go back to our comments. Looks like a lot of you got it there, so fantastic. Who was the first one here? We had a few. Rex White. Zach Leffler, you were the first one there with Wiley. This thing cut to black? I hope it doesn't. My goodness. Second screen at least does. LZ Wiley Baker, Spencer Sandlin. Looks like you were the first one with the full name there, so congratulations. Yep, a lot of you got that one. There you go. A little bit too easy. Well, before everybody loses their mind with this thing connecting and disconnecting, I think we're going to leave the show right there. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll stay tuned, for later tonight to see what happens with post-race inspection and find out if Daniel Suarez has locked up the victory and the last place finish has gone to Josh Williams for the Cup Series race today. But we will find out how that will shake out in due time. But in the meantime, congratulations to the winners from this race this weekend. My Twitter feed is @LastCarOnBrock. My Patreon is patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. And of course, the website is lastcar.info. Our next show is going to be next Sunday after the conclusion of the Cup Series race at Las Vegas. We will talk about both series competing that weekend. Do we have a Truck Series race that weekend, or are we off on the Truck Series? I need to check that. I think Jayski's done a good job here of kind of reformatting their page to show all three. Yes, it is going to be all three. We got the Leona Xfinity Series race, Truck Series Friday night, and the Cup Series race on Sunday. So we will find out how all that works out. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great evening. And again, congratulations to Suarez on a pretty crazy finish. Have a great week, everyone, and I will see you all next time. Boot-oop. Boot-oop. Yeah, want to let me hit the button? How about that? Boop.